Alright, what's up, everybody? Looks like we're recording, so here I am. I'm going to be talking about one thing that I really enjoy, which is birds. They're cool, so yeah, this is about birds and why they're cool. So let's get to it. Oh, gotta click. There we go. Alright, so what are birds? So, birds are animals that are especially evolved to fly around their environment. All birds, even flightless ones, came from a flighted bird at one time. So, I mean, they're pretty special animals just by the fact that they're, able to fly, and they've got a lot of adaptations to help them do this. So, one of those adaptations could be the fact that they have hollow bones. So you can see a little slicer of their bones on the left, and essentially they have this sort of somewhat weakened bone structure, but they're still quite strong. But by having these hollow bones, it allows them to essentially have a lighter skeleton, therefore being more equipped to fly better, etc. And it also happens that they have an extra cone in their eye. So our human eyes only can detect three colors. We can detect blue, green, and red. But birds actually have a whole another cone that's specifically for ultraviolet light. So that is kind of an interesting fun fact. So, what are the general types of birds? So you can see on the top left there is an American goldfinch, and he's supposed to represent the sort of songbirds, smaller birds of the general land and marshy areas. And then to the right of him you can see a Clark's nutcracker, and he sort of represents the corvids and the sort of mid-range high altitude birds. To the right of him you can see a wood duck, and he represents all the waterfowl and things like that. On the bottom left, you can see a great blue heron, and they sort of represent mostly like the sort of marshy water birds that you find sort of near to the coasts and on lakes and things like that. And then in the bottom middle, you have a peregrine falcon, and they sort of represents the birds of prey, sort of hawks and eagles sort of idea. And then on the bottom right, you have the owls, which are birds of prey, but I think I sort of consider them the whole another separate thing just because they're so adapted to their environment. And this is a great gray owl, which is the biggest owl of the all the owls in the North America. And you can see his face is sort of a round disc, and actually, what's really interesting is that sound coming towards the owl gets redirected by his face into his ears, so he can hear better what he's trying to hear, whether it be mice under the snow or other pieces of prey. So, my first case study on one of the coolest birds is osprey. So, what's interesting is that osprey have the largest range out of any predatory bird. So, if you look on the bottom left, you can see the map of where osprey inhabit, and they inhabit essentially all places in the world. Like there's no continent besides Antarctica that you can't find osprey, and that's quite interesting because they are, like I said before, the most spread around bird of prey out of all of them, which is quite interesting. And another thing that's interesting is that they are actually so adapted to catching fish, which is the primary and the only type of prey that they eat, that they split off on their evolutionary path before most other birds. So they are, even though they are birds, clearly they are much less related to other birds of prey than most other birds that you would find, which is interesting. So their tools for fish catching are zygodactyl talons and feet spicules. So on the left you can see their zygodactyl talons. So essentially what zygodactyl means is that instead of having three toes in the front and one in the back, they're able to switch them so that they have one toe in each corner, and you can see that pretty clearly in the bottom left picture. So this lets them grapple onto fish better and hold them with more ability. Yeah, and then also there's feet spicules on the right are kind of like barbs, so they sort of have directional barbs on their feet. So what this means for them is that when they catch a fish, they aren't able to let it go, and this can sometimes be to the osprey's detriment because when they catch the fish, it can end up sucking them under the water, and sometimes it can even kill them if they go for too big of a fish. So, kind of interesting. So, my next case study of bird coolness would be the burrowing owl. So, burrowing owls live in the burrows of prairie dogs. So, you can see some prairie dog burrows on the right, pretty cute, whatever. So, when the prairie dogs move out of their burrow, it's very common for burrowing owls to move in and live in them instead. So they do live on the ground. They're ground nesters, and something that's also interesting is that they are not nocturnal owls. They are diurnal. So they hang out in the day, which is interesting. So you can see a burrowing owl on the right there. They are pretty small. They're sort of the same size, maybe a little bit bigger than your average robin or something. So even though they are pretty cute and everything, they are pretty fierce. It looks like they have some sort of general prairie bird. I'm not sure exactly what it is in their talon on the left, but yeah, I mean, despite their cuteness, they are pretty fierce, and they, are killing machines like a lot of the predatory birds. And on the right, you can see a sort of family of younger owls, all perched together. So I thought that photo is pretty nice. So all right, now moving on to some of my personal favorite birds. So on the top left, you can see the red crossbill. So the red crossbill is actually the only type of bird that has a crossed bill, as you can see in that photo. And what's interesting is that their main food source is actually pine nuts. And so what they'll do is they will take the pine cone and they'll pry it open with their bill because they have more ability or they have more strength when closing their bill than opening it. So by having the crossed bill, they're able to pry open the pine cones and get the food inside. And because pine cones are only really produced by pine trees once every 3 or 4 years, they actually follow in a massive flock of the pine cone production around the country. So you'll only see them come through your area like once every 3 or 4 years, which is interesting. So the Townsend solitaire, which is to the right of the red crossbill, just the fluffy gray one, I like them because they sort of hang out in juniper forests, which are south facing, and I don't know, they're kind of interesting little habitat pockets for them, and I like their song. It kind of sounds like a squeaky swing, so kind of funny. And then on the top right is the shrike, and they're kind of like the sort of serial killer, awful ones of the bird world. They when they catch their prey, which could either be other smaller birds or small mammals or insects, they will impale them on sharp objects, commonly barbed wire, in order to preserve them and save them for later. And then on the bottom left, you can see the mountain bluebird, which I like for obvious reasons. It's very, very colorful and nice looking. And then in the bottom right is the western, or in the bottom middle is the western tanager. They're actually around here in Colorado, and they are very, very pretty. They go all the way out to California. And then in the bottom right is the painted bunting, and they are only found out east, but they're some of the most stunning birds of North America. So next, my favorite sort of general type of birds would be the corvids. So on the top left you can see crows, in the top middle you can see a raven, and then a Steller's jay. In the bottom left you can see a gray jay, and then a magpie, and then a pinyon jay. And there is very interesting facts about all of these birds. We'll just share a few. So crows, which you can see on the top left, are very intelligent. A group of them is called a murder. And what's interesting is that if one of the crows dies, they'll actually hold a funeral for all the other ones, and they'll all sort of make a circle and I guess mourn in their own way their fallen comrade. And then on the bottom left is the gray jay, and what they do is that they don't migrate during the winter, so they will stash away um, thousands, up to tens of thousands of pieces of food in the habitat around them, and they remember where it all is. So instead of having to find food during the summer, they're able to instead find the stuff that they've already cached and live off of it that way. So kind of interesting. So my personal favorite birds would be the Clark's nutcracker. That's on the left side of the screen, and they're very sort of rugged, high altitude trained birds. Um, very very cool. They just remind me of mountains and sort of harsh terrain, which I kind of find interesting. And then on the right, you can see the hermit thrush, and they're actually one of only three bird species that are able to sing with two notes at one time, and they have a very distinct song. I'd recommend if you have some sort of way to look it up, look up their song. It's very very interesting. So yeah, hermit thrush. So next are the biggest threats to birds. So here's a list of general threats to birds. So this is not a complete list. I'm skipping on some of the major ones like less insect population because of climate change or habitat loss, etc. But some of the biggest sort of threats to birds and biggest sort of direct killings that we cause them are the first one is outdoor cats. So cats are not exactly natural in this world. The birds did not sort of evolve with these sort of small cats to hunt them, and so because of this, sometimes they're often not evolved to know how to deal with them or to flee, and so the result of this is that 2.4 billion birds die due to outdoor cats each year in the U.S. alone. So this could be just house cats, coming from people's houses, or it could be feral cats. There's actually a extremely large problem in Australia right now because of feral cats. They're completely killing off both the small mammal and the bird population, and there are tens to hundreds of different species of animals going extinct just because of outdoor cats. And the next are the glass windows. So about 600 million birds die a year running into windows. So it's pretty easy to see how a bird could mistake a window for just a passage into somewhere else based on that photo in the middle. Windows are very reflective, and it's not like they're seeing through the window to the inside is why they crash into it. They crash into it because it reflects the light from outside, and they think that there's just more forest or whatever is outside past the window, and that's why they hit the window. So one way that you can sort of mitigate this is by putting up sort of stickers on your window. There are some sort of like transparent stickers that you can put up on your window that help the birds make sure that they don't fly into them. Or if you want a general solution, there are sort of non-reflective coatings that you can put on your window as well. That would be great for skyscrapers and things like that. And the next is the wind turbines. So wind turbines kill about 240,000 birds a year, and it's not exactly from what you'd expect. So instead of the birds actually hitting the turbine blades, what is interesting is that the turbines actually create a low pressure pocket behind the blades, and this is what most likely kills the birds. So essentially, what happens is that the birds, because of this such a low pressure behind the blades, the birds' internals, whether it be their lungs or their stomach, actually explode. So it's pretty awful, and that is one of the big downsides to wind air or wind energy creation, is that it kills hundreds of thousands of birds as well as bats, which we also critically need. But that's not what I'm talking about in this presentation today. But yeah, so wind turbines are all fun and games and whatever. So yep, basically, essentially, whether it be your windows or your cats, we need to mitigate how many birds are dying each year. There's only 50% of birds in the general population as there was like in 1950. So you know, there's a sharp decline in population happening right now, and cats are one of the largest reasons why. So just keep your cat inside, please, because it really does make a difference. Cats kill more than 300 birds a year if you let them outside. So, very clear reason to keep them inside. All right, and yeah, that is the end of my presentation. Here's just a peregrine falcon doing its cool dive. So, yeah, this has been my presentation on birds. Thanks for listening.